Welcome to Tanya Today. I'm Rabbi Fine, coming to you from Chabad Kadesh in Montreal, Canada, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya as we get ready for Pesach. It is shortly we won't be able to eat anything here from Chametz, and then we have to burn our Chametz. Some of you are already past that, like Michael in Germany. Pesach is, the Seder is Ot. Shalom to Robert in Boston, Teen in Canada, Jan is in Mexico, Diane in Arizona, Liz in Boca Raton, and John in North Carolina, Lori also North Carolina, David is with us in California, Beverly in Delray Beach, Florida, Davida and Liba in New York, Leah in Florida, Lena Simcha also is in Florida, Asher is in Tennessee, Tim in Texas, who else? Elisheva also in Tennessee, Mark in California, Leslie in North Carolina, Betty, welcome. Sandy in Michigan, Vicky in California, Elise in West Virginia, Vicky, California, I think I mentioned California, Arena in Colorado. We have with us Vilma, Michael, Moshe, Tim, Sam, Alan, Shlomo, Margot, Hiram. We have also Steve and Yantatalabenta and a name I can't make out, Yehuda, Harry, Frederick, Akoy. Beautiful. All right. So I'm sure everybody's prep is happening, and I'm sure we're going to have an amazing Pesach Seder, going out of Egypt, out of our own Egypt, our own limitations. All right. Continuing chapter 41, speaking about Avodah, what it means, divine service. What does it mean to serve? So, if you serve out of love, that's not called service. That's not a service of a servant when you do it out of love. Alone. Love alone, in other words. As you have a real strong desire, you want to connect to God. And that prompts you to study Tanya right now. And that's amazing. However, it's not called service of God. The verse tells us, you shall serve the Lord your God. So it signifies the idea of being a servant. In other words, you are motivated not out of love, but out of servitude, reverence, awe, or what we call fear also. Likewise, it says in the Shema that, not in the Shema, but and to God, to Him, you shall serve. So what does this kind of service mean? So the Zohar explains, this is like an ox which you first place on it a yoke in order to make it useful to the world, right? Because without that yoke, well, it's just going to sit in the sun and eat. But you put a yoke on it, and now it starts to plow. So that makes it useful for the world. So too, a human being first must submit to the yoke of heaven. God as being king. And that's the beginning of divine service. That's called service, submission, as we spoke about yesterday, bittul. And the only place that God can rest is when you subjugate yourself to Him. Right? When you do it out of love, it's not that way. When you do it out of love, that's why the beginning in service of God is the idea of reverence, awe, fear, if you will, meaning the idea of servant to a master, to a king, to God being king. So the Zohar says there are two categories and levels, meaning that there is that of a servant, as we just explained, serving the master out of again, reverence, respect, reverence, awe, which we put that into the word fear, in fear meaning in that context. And then there is the category of a child who serves their father in heaven, out of love. Now, although you may find, a child that will serve also as a servant will do it out of servitude, not out of love. That's true. But it's impossible to attain a degree of the higher level of awe, yirei law, without the idea with it. Sorry. So what comes out of here, that if you just have love, then you're lacking service. So this is something we've learned previously. A bird has two wings, and you need both ultimately. The point over here is that service of God is related to not love of God, but again, respect, reverence, awe, all under the word what we call fear. That's a short class today on the eve of Pesach. It's short. So what does that mean? It means that the beginning is the mindset. We've been kind of conditioned to believe that love is, the first and foremost of everything in life, in relationships, in our relationship, human relationships, our relationship to God. And here in this chapter, what the Alter Rebbe is bringing out, it's not. And the truth is, if we look at Maimonides in his teachings, he speaks about relationships between husband and wife. The first thing that he writes for a husband and for a wife is to have respect for each other and then love. Love will not flourish if it's not first there's respect. Respect makes space for the other person. It's about the other person. It's deference to the other person. That's what respect means. Right? Reverence even more so. Awe even greater. Right? Love is about my feeling. So that feeling could be very self-directed. That feeling could be very smothering of the other. And therefore, the beginning of all relationships is the idea that we're speaking about over here, service, which comes from, again, the concept of fear, not love. Now, as the Zohar says, there's two things that are necessary to have, but the beginning and the root and the core of things, where it all starts, is the idea of respect, reverence, awe, all coupled under the word and the concept, more than a word, it's a concept called fear. Again, fear is not of punishment, as we've mentioned many times. Fear meaning on at the presence of, well, we're going to learn more about that forthcoming. Presence of reverence and ultimately in awe. That's the story. Okay, I'm going to take just a couple of questions because it's Erev Pesach, lots to do. I don't see any questions on Facebook. So Yehuda is asking, the service of God comes from a place. Again, let's be very precise about our concept over here. When we're saying, Yehuda, the idea of serving, you could say the word serving out of love, but you're not serving. It's love. So it's not a service. It's not felt as a servitude, right? So that's why it really doesn't come. It's not an expression of love. Love is about yearning. It's about cleaving, right? It's not about service. Now, through love, you can serve. That's true. But and that feeling can lead you, but the idea of it is really it's coming from the concept of, in others, having the yoke of another, right? What was the metaphor? You put what does a cow want to do? You think a cow wants to plow a field? Somehow I doubt it. It probably just wants to sit in the field and eat the grass and moo along, right? You put a yoke on it. Is it loving it? Somehow I doubt it. It's like, a yoke. It's the same thing. You put a yoke on a person, then now you got to do something that God needs you to do that is, has a value. That has a value. It's useful, right? That God needs you for. That's not love. When you do it out of love, it's not a yoke on you, right? It is a hop, skip, and a jump. So that's the metaphor of the yoke. So that's why it's not love. Okay. Love is you'll do for another. Love doesn't mean you won't do for another. But it's not out of servitude. It's not out of the yoke upon you. It's with a hop, skip, and a jump. When you right? It's a different feeling. It's a different feeling when you're doing it from love to go get your parent something, and you do it lovingly with a hop, skip, and a jump, or you do it out of service. Out of obedience. Vicky, can it start as a realization of God's love for us? Yeah, but the question is what are we responding with? So we need to have both. As we've learned this before, we need to have both, right? But the question is, what's the beginning? So service is the beginning. When it is said to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, as a culmination of fear and awe. Not really. No. No, that's love.
Pesach Sameach, Rabbi Fine. I have
You
a
too,
short
Michael.
question.
Sure, go ahead.
When we left Egypt, we are called servants of Hashem in the Torah, but we are also called army of God. And I read that it's the difference because the servant works hard with hard toil and labor, but he doesn't want to self-sacrifice. He has no mesirat nefesh. How does this correspond with the love and fear concept that we learned, two wings? Is mesirat nefesh that I would sacrifice myself for the will of God, not literally maybe, but that I do more as I could, and spend time I could spend for free time in Torah or the community.
Right.
How does this?
So Mesiras Nefesh is beyond love and beyond awe. It's beyond it. It's yeah. It's beyond it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's more essential. Love and awe are powers of the soul. Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, comes from the core of the soul, so it's beyond it. Ernest, does a non-Jew keep mitzvot out of love or out of service? Is both? Yeah, both. You need both. Yeah, you need both. Okay, last comment. Alan, please share.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Yira is a really interesting concept, and it's also close in terms of the otiot letters with Vayar, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting also that I spend a lot of time taking a look at the first chapter of Bereshis, I get pretty familiar with it. And in the fourth sentence, it says, Vayar Elokim et ha'or ki tov, which is really interesting because it's the first time that those letters appear in the Torah, and also the first time tov appears in the Torah,
Mm-hmm.
So, I take away from it that, that there's kind of a hint there, a remez to awe. At least a word having the same letters is also having a certain
Absolutely correct.
level of goodness of tov,
Right. Absolutely. So actually we're going to learn that shortly, and it's the idea of the presence of God. If God is not real to us in any dimension, but very much removed, he's not present, he's not seen. So to see the presence of God in your mind's eye, not in the physical eye, but in the mind's eye, will then bring you to fear, right? Just as, you're sitting in a room by yourself, you act one way, and then all of a sudden someone, maybe not so important, comes into the room, you kind of, sit up a little differently. And if someone really important came into the room, then you really kind of check yourself out to make sure you are, best behavior, as we say. Why is that? Because you saw someone that now brought you to fear, not fear of the punishment, but just fear of the presence, just because of their presence, not because they may be, judgmental or whatever the case may be, but just of their presence. That itself leads us to, to behave differently. So that's the connection between seeing and fear, between those words.
Does the Alter Rebbe speak about this particular pasuk, this particular sentence in terms of?
I don't know if I don't think so. I think but he will speak about it, but not in that particular reference. But but very good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Beautiful. All right, folks. It is Erev Pesach. So I'm going to bid everyone a wonderful, happy, kosher Pesach, a meaningful, beautiful Seder for everyone. And if you know a Jew that doesn't have a place for a Seder, make sure that they have a place. There shouldn't be anybody left behind. And all other questions, Davida and everybody will deal with them after the Seders. All right. Chag Kasher v'Sameach, a good Shabbos, and thank you all for joining. God bless you.